I'm Steve, one of the senior consultants at Oakridge. We thought a space for conversations would help us all keep connected and focused on the main topics relating to the hectic world of work in which we're living, leading and managing in. You know, especially the challenges and the opportunities that the recent pandemic has brought us and have brought into sharp relief. The aim of our podcast series is to provide you with some insightful and informative guidance to help support you and your organisation in a concise and informative way to drive your business forwards both with insight and knowledge. We're going to work towards topics that really support you and your business. Series 1 focuses on the realities of living, leading, managing and working through COVID-19 crisis and beyond. We will have focus points on the headers of leadership, coaching, change, team effectiveness and mental health. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, listen while you're walking to the dog or doing the dishes or grabbing that quick butty between meetings. As I talk to my friends and colleagues, we've got Brigit Egan, our Managing Director, Deborah Larder-Shaw, our Accounts Director, and Jerry Scott, one of our Senior Consulting team. So, hi folks, welcome.
Hello there, Steve. Hi there.
I'm absolutely delighted to have you as my crew today on this podcast. But it'd be good just to let people know who's in the room. So let's give a quick brief intro. So Brigit, can we start with you as our Managing Director?
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Yes, so I'm MD of Oakridge. I joined Oakridge about 15 years ago. I'd been in global consulting practices before that, and then had worked for a large international corporate bank. And the reason I joined Oakridge was very much about the culture. It was a culture of excellence and client focus and high levels of integrity, and the people were just brilliant. So it's been an absolute joy to sit in the seat and lead Oakridge over the years.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, and we've been along with you with that journey as well. So
have indeed.
Yes. So Deborah, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I've worked with Oakridge the past 6 years. I've got a background in working in people development and have done for over 20 years now, so I feel very old. But so my responsibilities is really twofold. One for the Stride program, which is our female leadership development program. And I look after Stride, and we're on our 20th cohort of Stride now, which is fantastic, and supporting women across the North and Northwest. And then I also lead some of our key accounts across various sectors, including public and private sector, which I really enjoy, and picking up sort of opportunities when working with clients and introducing to the relevant parts of Oakridge.
And it's been a delight to have you work with you, Deborah, I must say.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Jerry, tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm the one that sounds like Andy Murray, but I've been with Oakridge now for, well, it's more than 10 years anyway, so quite some time. Before that, I come from a manufacturing background, so very much supply chain in organisations such as Unilever or L'Oreal or Heinz. My background is very much about big numbers of people and how we get organisational change. And I suppose that's where my focus lies within Oakridge, is trying to get alongside clients and think about where's the leadership team going, what's getting in the way, and how do organisations actually manage to continue to change and continue to evolve over time.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, guys. That's really, really helpful. I think it sets the scene. And one of the questions we're going to ask everybody who comes on is what's attracted them to work with Oakridge, work for Oakridge, etc. So it'd be good to do that. Now, this will be for listeners of a certain age, but Victor Khayyam famously said, I liked it so much I bought the company. So Brigit, you did that, didn't you? So you've already started with a little bit of reflections on what attracted you to Oakridge, but what's the difference for you? Difference that makes a difference with Oakridge?
Brilliant, Steve. Yes, and that is very true. I joined Oakridge as a consultant and just absolutely loved the business, the clients and the colleagues I worked with. So when there was an opportunity to buy into it, it was a no-brainer for me, and it's been one of the best decisions I've made. What I really love about working at Oakridge is the interaction, collaboration with colleagues. We've got a brilliant culture of openness, transparency, friendship, very supportive. So that I think is very special and very precious for us. And so that's on the sort of inside, but on the outside, it's the quality of clients that we have. We work with some exceptional companies and exceptional people, and it's a real privilege and joy to have the insights and the interactions and the partnerships that we have developed over the last 23 years that Oakridge has been in business.
Yeah, oh, fantastic. And I agree with all that sentiment. And I'm sure you probably do as well, Deborah. But what attracted you to Oakridge? Because you work for other consultancies, as you said. What's the difference for you?
Yeah, and as I said before, it's almost 25 years I've been working with consultancies now. And for me, what really attracted me to Oakridge was, and I've never come across an organisation so aligned to its values and who truly lives the values of the organisation day in, day out. And that's very, very unique. And it's, as I say, Oakridge is really the only organisation that I've come across in my entire career history who's been like that. And it's about putting the client first, so always doing the right thing for the clients. So we're very much driven about bending over backwards for our clients and doing what the right thing is. And that feels, for me, hugely refreshing. I think the other two things for me that stand out for Oakridge is our muddy boots approach. So we can roll our sleeves up and get stuck in, and I really like that about, we're not sort of a consultancy who stands back, and that old adage of the consultants who sort of takes your clock and then tells you the time. It's much more about that, getting stuck in, and that's the reason we've developed partnerships and relationships that have been here for as long as Oakridge has been, which is over the 23 years. And we don't stand still, as Brigit said, that collaboration, but we're constantly striving to be thinking about the next best thing. And we do that through think tanks and through thought leadership, which again, are hugely inspiring.
Yeah. Jerry, I think we can probably hear... Are
you hearing my dog going off in the background?
So, same thing, you came out of industry to step into the consulting world. What attracted you to Oakridge, and what have you noticed about Oakridge?
I think you've heard lots of it already. So this whole sense of the community that we have amongst ourselves is really powerful, and something that certainly feeds me. I learn every day in Oakridge. And I think if I match that off to Deborah's point about muddy boots pragmatism, I love the fact that we get alongside and partner with our clients, and we spend time with them really focused on what's going to have an impact. So I love the fact that no two engagements are the same. Yeah. And I learn from them. And our focus is always about what our clients can learn, what individuals can learn, that allows them to get unstuck, to keep things moving, to get momentum. So that's what really switches me on to the work at Oakridge.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, guys, and all that resonates with me as well. I used to buy Oakridge's services. I was in an L&D role, and I used to buy it. And the thing that really attracted me as a buyer was that care, was that muddy boots pragmatism, and designing stuff that fitted the purpose. It wasn't a boilerplate solution, and that's continued to be I lived through it as I've now stepped into being a consultant in the consulting world as well. And I think one of the other things that for me links Oakridge people together, two words, is people and performance. And it's focus on your people. That will give you great performance. That will grow your business, and that's a real connecting thing for me. So let's stop the sales process now. Every side of the marketing process. Let's jump in, because the listener really wants to know is what are we going to be talking about, and our aim is to focus on the things that are really important for our clients. So that's really where I could start with you, Deborah. As our accounts director, you got a real insight to the voice of the customer, what's going on for folks, what questions are they asking. So where would you want to start with that conversation, Deborah?
Yeah, I think for one thing, we're all living through something that, is really unique in terms of nobody's really been through anything like this before. So there's a constant change. I think that's the main word I would use, that it's just change. and it's changing daily, it's changing weekly, it's changing monthly. So all of our clients are dealing with that, and many have really been completely surprised by how well they've dealt with it and how quickly they've dealt with it. You know, I've talked to a lot of clients who said they managed to clear sites, some sites the size of small towns, in 2 days. And had you thought about that before, you probably would have had to have a 5-year plan in place to get everybody off site, you know. So things have happened really, really quickly for people, and that's been really fascinating and interesting to be alongside our clients watching that. But for me, there's lots of things. There's about supporting people through this change. So both from a sort of a practical point of view in terms of supporting people back to work, feeling valued, but some people have been working all the way through it. Some people are furloughed. Some people, you know, everyone's in different situations. And I think one of the things organisations are really starting to recognise is we need to look after people individually, and everybody's going through a different process. So, and it's about keeping everybody feeling safe and valued through that process.
Yeah.
I think mental health support is a really key area that I'm seeing a lot of clients talking about. So really supporting people both from an awareness point of view, but also to support people through all of this this change. And for some people, quite a challenging time it can be. So we're doing quite a lot of work around that. And I think then also it's then how do we look to the future? So organisations have obviously had to deal with the here and now, and through the change, they're sort of thinking and supporting people. But then what does the future look like? And I think for me, resilience, agility are really going to be key areas of people going forward, and that actually and not losing the learning. I think that's another thing that clients are keen to, because we've had some really great things happen as a result of this being forced upon us. And I think a lot of clients, what I'm hearing from them is saying, we don't want to lose some of that learning. Some of it's really valuable and will take us forward as an organisation. So I think that's, you know, going to be really interesting to watch the next stage of this and what it means for business and what it means for people.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds, I mean, it's a really, really rich list. And I guess it's all about thinking about how can I best respond in that circumstance to the changes that the COVID situation has brought us. Any thoughts from Jerry or Brigit at this stage?
Yeah, I think just reflecting on what Deborah is saying, and what I've seen is, you know, it's about courageous leadership, and, you know, having to lead in the face of sometimes adversity and challenge, and seen so much of that with people making, being very decisive, taking some action, and, you know, that sort of being brave, stepping into the unknown. I think, you know, we've seen a lot of that from our clients, and indeed I've seen a lot of that internally at Oakridge as well. You know, having the courage to do things that we perhaps haven't done before, being very decisive. So those are the sorts of things I've kind of reflected on.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting because a crisis always allows you to do things that you couldn't do any other time. And we've seen organisations turn their world upside down in a matter of hours and days, being really courageous, really brave, putting in lots and lots of effort. And I think one of the things that I'm noticing is people are tired. People are quite tired. It's been a frenetic pace, and there's lots of resilient people out there facing into this, being strong, trying to continue at this pace in terms of making changes.
yeah,
And what worries me slightly is alongside that, there's a desire to discover a new normal and return to a new normal. And one of the things that I've been talking to a few clients about is just how do we actually manage to get a hold of the spirit of being more entrepreneurial, more innovative, being more open to change, being more agile, whilst at the same time looking after ourselves so that it doesn't just feel like the world never stops and we're just spinning. So how do we become better at being agile, challenging ourselves in a more normal way? And I think that's a really interesting challenge now that lots of organizations are going through. Whilst they have to make really tough decisions in the middle of all that. Yeah. So I love this idea of courage, Brigit. Yeah, that courage. And I suppose it's something about how do we get that to be a norm through our organization and not just on a critical few who are are probably feeling pretty stretched at the moment. Yeah.
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 And I guess it's how do we recognize and appreciate that courage? Because, you know, being brave and taking those difficult decisions or doing things in a different way, you know, how do we actually acknowledge it and take the time just to appreciate what's been achieved, because I think we're constantly looking forward, you know, to the next day, next week, next project, and sometimes it's just that you know, having the opportunity just to pause and reflect on, you know, the significance of what some people have achieved in a very short period of time.
So go on, just tell everyone, what's the T-shirt that you're wearing?
It says "Just breathe," and I think that helps in certain situations. I came across a Maori term which I think is just beautiful, and it's kia kahaha. So it helps with the breathing technique, kia kahaha, and it means be strong. So sometimes, you know, when I'm taking that leap of faith, kia kahaha helps me.
Terrific.
I would just add into that, it's be strong is great. And as somebody with a massive be strong transactional driver, which if you come to us, we can talk to you about that, folks, is I always got to remember to ask for help along the way. So it's be strong, be courageous, ask for help, I think is a really good set of thoughts to have in your mind at this particular point.
Yes, yeah.
Deborah, can I just loop back to you? Because one of the things that I've experienced over the last 10 weeks is I've had to turn my life upside down and to learn how to do this stuff virtually, you know, and I'm sure that must be on the questions as the clients as they come through with. They're used to seeing us in a conference room, having a great interaction, really, really impactful interactions in conference rooms, small groups or coaching. What questions are people asking about the virtual?
So I think absolutely. I think, you know, we are moving towards a virtual world, and I think people have seen the benefits of that. But also the other side of things, which is that bit we've talked about, that people are just seem to be going from back to back Zoom meetings all day, and are you know, are quite exhausted by it, and the working days just got longer, because I think a lot of people have commented about, you know, they've taken their commute out of the picture, which just added more days onto their working day. So there's a huge amount of exhaustion, burnout, and all of those things that are going on for people. But for me, I think organisations are now really sort of thinking about how do you blend technology with sort of, you know, remaining human in a digital world, and asking those questions about what will performance look like, how will I manage performance, how will I lead, how will I take this organisation forward in this with the new technology that we've all embraced, and the new digital way of working, the new virtual way of working, but not losing that human touch. And I think that's going to be really critical in terms of just remembering that people are human, and then thinking about where do people draw their energy from? Because a lot of people got their energy from bouncing off people in the, you know, in the offices, talking to people in the corridors, having lunch with somebody, having a chat. Where will people draw their energy from? And I think for me, the other big thing as well as organisations is people are now looking to their organisations to say, what are you doing to support people, communities? So there's something about that sort of bigger social responsibility piece as well, I think is really important in terms of how did we all handle ourselves and how did we all manage ourselves going through this process, looking back and then looking at forward, and then how we going to lead it. But for me, one of the things I think is really organisations are looking at all the practical things. So how do I interview virtually? How do I, you know, conduct a performance review? How do I actually have a performance conversation with somebody virtually? And I think those are all the things that we'll actually, you know, we'll focus on over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things about this this period, it's made me take my own medicine, if that makes sense. So, you know, it's all right to stand at the front of the room and say, oh yeah, be agile. Learning how to do it yourself is a good reflection back, and I think we can bring that learning back to the clients. Our clients. Jerry, you and I are wrestling with, you know, converting stuff that we were going to do to the virtual environment. What's your learning here?
I think I think within all of this, Steve, I mean, we've worked virtually for years because we work with international teams, yeah? But we've probably always viewed it as, oh, if we have to, this is how we can do things,
Right.
yeah? We've supported leaders who have international teams where they've never met, yeah, everybody other than on screen. And we've kind of worked around that in terms of ways of doing things. I think what I've learned is, do you know what? There's been some real upsides to this as well.
Mm.
I'm talking to a number of teams that are closer than they used to be because they're having more regular short check-ins on screen, which doesn't always feel great, but actually there's a bit more affinity between people. There's a bit more, if you like, psychological trust, because we've opened up and we've been dealing with something where none of us quite know what's going to happen next, and none of us is feeling completely secure in that. And so it's allowed some new, fresh connections. And so I guess what I take as learning from that is it's not just about some of the clunky things of, can I shake hands with somebody? Can I be in the same room with them? Are my one-to-ones face-to-face? But actually just about how are we really thinking about somebody else, what they need, where we're at, and are we connecting or not? And we can always connect in different ways. Yeah. So if we take it back to the connection rather than the approach, it gives liberty to do things in different ways as well.
And I think what I've noticed as well is we've built on that previous virtual experience and actually expanded it. And I think we're making some really rich learning solutions or process solutions to support some of those great questions we've outlined. Folks, I'm going to move the conversation on because the aim of this podcast series will be to focus on those topics. We've developed series 1, about 10 episodes, which we are launching in this intro podcast. Our best wish. So I wonder what our best wish is for this podcast series. Brigit, what would be your best wish for the podcast series? You've commissioned it. So what would you want from this series for our clients?
I would love for each of the podcast series episodes that listeners can take away some real practical learning. So as a result of listening to the insights and the stories and the anecdotes and the tips and techniques, that they take away at least one thing that they can either implement or do differently or think about. So earlier on, Jerry, we were talking about creating new habits and ways of doing things, and I would hope our podcast can help drive some of that as well as being supportive.
Brilliant. Well, let's honour that spirit straight away then. So I'm going to ask you a question, guys. Have you got a practical tip you could give our listeners right here, right now, just based on some of those themes that are coming out? Our intention is each podcast episode will have at least 4, 5, up to 10 pragmatic tips. So where would we start? So let's start, Brigit, let's come back to you. Where would you start? What would be a very pragmatic tip you would give listeners right now?
Ironically, for me, it is to listen, and to listen really well. I think we are losing our ability to listen because of all the noise that goes on around us, quick headlines, sound bites. So I think, really, there's a lovely Sanskrit word called rasa, which means juice. And it's a technique, a listening technique where the R is you receive, the A is you appreciate, so appreciate the other person's perspective and where they're coming from. The S is to summarize, because when you play back to people what you've heard, they feel really listened to. And then the final part of that is, take action. What are you going to do as a result of that great conversation or that interaction? So for me, listening's absolutely key. Listening with our whole bodies, and not being distracted by the noise around us.
That's brilliant. We'll make sure that the RASA model is on a little check sheet for folks to, when they want to visit the website, they'll be able to download that and read through a few of the tips are based around that. Thank you for that. Jerry, what would you advise or provide a pragmatic tip?
Yeah, a little observation. I was watching actually a webinar last night by two of our colleagues, so Joe Clare and Mark Blanchard, talking about energy, because it's so important that we look after ourselves in this sort of high state of flux where everything's changing as we're going along. And within all of that, of course, we're talking a little bit about choosing to do things that are good for you, choosing to do things that manage your energy. The reality is, most of the things that we do are based on our habits. And I think it's a good thought at the moment that we've all had to change some of our habits. Maybe your habit was in the morning a particular set of sequences that you would go through until you suddenly arrived at your desk at work. Yeah, those will have changed. But there's lots of things that we have an opportunity at the moment to choose some new habits to put in place for ourselves. And so I think that's a really important thing for people to just take some time to reflect is, what habits am I choosing to put in place? And are they the ones that are going to be good for me? Rather than just coming as a result of, ugh, I've had to do something differently.
Fantastic. So think about...
Sorry, that's our dog barking.
The dogs are talking to each other.
Apologies.
Shop on that. Dog communication, it's fantastic. You should... Deborah, what would be your tip?
For me, it's about having engaging conversations. I'm talking to a lot of clients at the moment about engaging conversations and having conversations that, you know, help people in terms of performance, in terms of helping the organisation move forward. So it links very much to what Brigit was talking about listening, and what Jerry was talking about forming habits. But over the last few months, we've all had an insight into each other's lives, into each other's homes, into each other's families. And we've all seen so much more of each other. And also going through the crisis, I think people have seen a lot more about people's vulnerabilities and all of those things and challenges and personal challenges that people have faced over the time. And it's about harnessing that in order to have engaging conversations in a virtual world, and really focusing on those tips that Brigit and Jerry have just given in terms of, you know, being in the moment, concentrating, perhaps not having as many Zoom calls, but having really high quality ones.
And I know we've got some stuff on engaging conversations again, so we'll make sure that there's a clear link from the show notes to a couple of hints and tips around engaging conversations.
So there's some great resources on the website.
Fantastic, thank you guys. Now, one of the way we'll run these podcasts is we'll end it with one of our organizational beliefs, which is abundance. So sharing and giving as much as we can. So we'll ask each guest or consultant who's talking on a subject just to give us a thought around a book that they found valuable, or perhaps somebody that they're following, we should follow at the moment on the particular topic, who's got some great ideas, or there might be a website, a go-to website that you would recommend, or indeed there might be another podcast that you're currently listening to that's really generating some creative thoughts and ideas to help people focus on the future and take them from where they are to where they need to go to. So we won't ask everybody for one of those, but we'll just go around and just get something from each of you. So if I could start with Brigit, what would be your thought? What would be something you'd want to leave the listeners with as an extra resource?
Brilliant. Well, I'm a Twitter fan, as some of you know, and I find I find Twitter really helpful in terms of just getting a flavour of what's happening out there. So the sort of Twitter folk that I like to follow are kind of local. So there's Biz Manchester, which is really useful in terms of understanding what's happening in business across the Greater Manchester. It shares lots of innovation examples that companies are doing. and that's a nice way of clicking into that. I'm also a great fan of Andy Burnham. You know, I think he's doing some great things around the city, so I enjoy listening. I enjoy following him and getting those regular updates. And then I also like Seth Godin. I don't know if you've come across him. He's an American author and business executive. And one of his philosophies is around creating the sense of community. And, you know, we've certainly done that. And one of the insights that he's offered, which I think is quite helpful, is when you create a sense of community, keep the energy going by somebody always spinning the plate. And I think we do that exceptionally well at Oakridge. There's always someone that spins the plate to keep the energy going.
Yeah, and just to build on that, it doesn't have to be the boss, you know.
Absolutely.
Community thing, and picking that up. So that was Biz Manchester, Andy Burnham, and Seth Godin.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, fantastic. Jerry, where would you go to?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to this whole thought about habits. So there is a wonderful book by a guy called Charles Duhigg, titled "The Power of Habit." It starts off very interesting, because it talks about actually what habits really are and the whole element of psychology behind that. Then it becomes quite powerful because it goes into our own personal habits and how we can choose and how we can manage habits so that we get the best from them. And then it even dials up further because it goes into organizational habits. So if you're thinking about, oh my goodness, our organization has just changed so much in the last 3 months, thinking as to what habits do we want to have in the organization going forward, there's lots of good stuff in that book from Charles Duhigg, just to prompt that thinking.
That's fantastic, Jerry. Thank you so much. Is there anything in there, how not to eat cheese butties?
There is, Steve, but sometimes you've got to really want to change the habit as well. We can talk about that after, Steve.
Deborah, what would be on your mind to leave the listeners with?
I recently listened to a podcast. I love listening to Desert Island Discs. It's one of my favourite things because I love the mix of hearing about really fascinating people, but also listening to the music that they enjoy. I love it. But I was listening to a podcast on the Desert Island Discs series from Martin Lewis. He's the guy who owned Money Saving Expert, and he's often on TV and he writes and things like that. But he sold his stake. Well, he sold his business for £87 million.
Wow.
And he still works 70 hours a week. And for me, that was a really interesting perspective about doing what you really love and doing what you enjoy. It's not about the money. So, and he just he's lived a very, very interesting and challenging life. I found it hugely inspirational, found it hugely emotional. But if anyone hasn't listened to his Desert Island Disc, I would really recommend it.
Fantastic. And I think that just goes to show, you know, with the richness of podcasts that are out there, there's lots of different aspects we can listen to get insights into our own challenges, personal challenges, but also when we're in business and organizations and helping organizations go forward. So that's a really interesting question for our listeners, which is, what are you loving about your work today? Ponder, a strokey beard moment, just to ponder that. So folks, we're going to wrap up the podcast now. I want to say thank you so much for joining on the podcast. Next podcast will be just me talking to one of our colleagues about one of these really important topics, landing some really helpful tips. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining. We'd like to just say cheerio to our listeners. Cheerio.
Bye for now. Cheers.
Thank you, Steve, for leading it so well. So thank you, and thank you to our listeners.
No, it's a pleasure. So folks, I'd like to say thank you for listening to the podcast, and we really hope you enjoyed our conversation today. On behalf of the Oakridge team, we hope you enjoyed our virtual connection space for conversations time, and you found it both practical and informative. As I said, I'll be interviewing key people to help support you and your organizational needs, and I'll be starting with the wealth of talent in our consulting team. And as I've said before, we'll be rolling out the podcast on the topics that you are telling us are really important to you. We'd obviously love to start a conversation with you to see how consultants like Jerry, Brigit, and my other colleagues can help your business grow and thrive. The best way to get hold of us is via our email at info@oakridgecentre.co.uk, and Natalie Griffiths, our business office manager, will get one of us to connect with you. You can also contact us via Twitter, and that's at Oakridge Consult, or look us up on our website. That's www.oakridgecentre.co.uk. That's www.oakridgecentre.co.uk. If you fancy giving the show a kind of review wherever possible, that would be great. And if you'd like to share it with somebody, that would also be brilliant. Please don't forget to subscribe. And as ever, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Take suggestions for other how do I questions that you might think we could feature on future episodes. So thanks for listening. We really do appreciate it. And we do hope you'll join us next time, again on Virtual Connections, Space for Conversations, where I'll be talking to Mark Crabtree, one of my colleagues, about the question, how do I build resilience when undergoing significant change at work and home? Probably something that's never been in such sharp focus as now. So from all of us at Oakridge, stay safe and take care.